This has been a strange week. Any well-minded person would think that in this country, when there is a transition of power, it should be as seamless as possible. That is not going to happen at all. In the first segment of this week's show, I'm going to take a look at President Obama's farewell address. As you all know, I have been critical of his performance the last 8 years, but I will say this. He said what he had to say for the results he wanted, and I have no issue with that. However, I will look at 2 items he talked about in the address. The first one, he talks about the racial tension in this country. In this clip, Obama speaks about this, and I have something to say about it.
So if we're going to be serious about race going forward, we need to uphold laws against discrimination in hiring and in housing and in education and in the criminal justice system. That is what our Constitution and our highest ideals require. But laws alone won't be enough. Hearts must change. They won't change overnight. Social attitudes oftentimes take generations to change. But if our democracy is to work the way it should in this increasingly diverse nation, then each one of us need to try to heed the advice of a great character in American fiction, Atticus Finch, who said, "You never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you climb into his skin and walk around in it." For blacks and other minority groups, that means tying our own very real struggles for justice to the challenges that a lot of people in this country face. Not only the refugee or the immigrant or the rural poor or the transgender American, but also the middle-aged white guy who, from the outside, may seem like he's got advantages, but has seen his world upended by economic and cultural and technological change. We have to pay attention and listen. For white Americans, it means acknowledging that the effects of slavery and Jim Crow didn't suddenly vanish in the 60s. That when minority groups voice discontent, they're not just engaging in reverse racism or practicing political correctness. When they wage peaceful protest, they're not demanding special treatment, but the equal treatment that our founders promised. For native-born Americans, it means reminding ourselves that the stereotypes about immigrants today were said almost word for word about the Irish and Italians and Poles, who it was said were going to destroy the fundamental character of America. And as it turned out, America wasn't weakened by the presence of these newcomers. These newcomers embraced this nation's creed, and this nation was strengthened. So, regardless of the station that we occupy, we all have to try harder. We all have to start with the premise that each of our fellow citizens loves this country just as much as we do, that they value hard work and family just like we do, that their children are just as curious and hopeful and worthy of love as our own.
the first part, he is 100% correct, but then it goes downhill from there. Mr. Obama, I have a very important question for you. Have you been paying attention, or do you just do not care? I want to know, and others do also. I ask this because of what you said. Give me a break on that BS. I'll be the first person to admit that the GOP should have not did what it did at the start of your first term. But to say what you said is disingenuous, and you know it. I know good and damn well that they know that racism did not disappear completely, but what I'm seeing in the last 8 years, Team Blue made it all about race, and you did nothing. The narrative of, if you don't support Obama, you are racist, backfired big time. Also, there's reverse racism in this country. The nonsense of black people can't be racist needs to stop. Chris Rock talked about the subject, and that was 20 years ago. Don't believe me? It's on YouTube. Moving on. Also in the speech, he spoke about what I've been talking about for years, and that is playing the narrative of confirmation bias. Now I'm going to play this part, and I will give you my thoughts.
For too many of us, it's become safer to retreat into our own bubbles, whether in our neighborhoods or on college campuses or places of worship, or especially our social media feeds. Surrounded by people who look like us and share the same political outlook and never challenge our assumptions. And the rise of naked partisanship and increasing economic and regional stratification, the splintering of our media into a channel for every taste, all this makes this great sorting seem natural, even inevitable. And increasingly, we become so secure in our bubbles that we start accepting only information, whether it's true or not, that fits our opinions, instead of basing our opinions on the evidence that is out there. And this trend represents a third threat to our democracy. Look, politics is a battle of ideas. That's how our democracy was designed. In the course of a healthy debate, we prioritize different goals and the different means of reaching them. But without some common baseline of facts, without a willingness to admit new information, and concede that your opponent might be making a fair point, and that science and reason matter, then we're going to keep talking past each other, and we'll make common ground and compromise impossible. And isn't that part of what so often makes politics dispiriting? How can elected officials rage about deficits when we propose to spend money on preschool for kids, but not when we're cutting taxes for corporations? How do we excuse ethical lapses in our own party, but pounce when the other party does the same thing? It's not just dishonest, this selective sorting of the facts. It's self-defeating. Because, as my mom used to tell me, reality has a way of catching up with you.
What took you so long? Wait, I forgot. The brand of Team Blue was more important at the time, so now you can speak freely about it. Now, both sides are guilty, but to take a swipe at Team Red tells me that you are like most people on Team Blue. As long as we act this way, it is justified. That is sad, because all that does give more confirmation because you are the president, so it must be true. So in closing, the last 8 years have been strange in this country, and honestly, I really do not know from a moral standpoint alone that we have, at the very minimum, become more open with other segments of the population, because it sure does not look like it. So I hope we, as as citizens, learn to love again.